First, I want to say a very good afternoon to David Hencke. Good afternoon, David. How are you?
I'm very well. It's nice to talk to you again as well.
Yes, good to have you on the show again. Yes, and I want to say that obviously David is an honorary guest of the show, so we have to mention that bit. But we've got quite a bit to talk about tonight, haven't we, David? About the things that have been going on recently.
Yes, indeed, we have both what is happening to the 50s women and their claim to get their pensions back, and also to the government's total surprise announcement that they were abolishing the winter fuel allowance, except for the very poorest people on pension credit. So nearly 11 million pensioners are to lose this winter.
Yeah, that's quite a thing, really, isn't it? Because I don't think that's been done before since it's come in.
No, it hasn't, actually, and it certainly wasn't in the Labour Party manifesto.
No. So we've got that. So I wonder if we start off with the are 50s women going to get anything at all?
Yeah, so I'm actually quite pessimistic about this, because what has happened is the new Labour government have decided that the only negotiation is going to be with WASPI, which immediately limits the issue to the report from the Parliamentary Ombudsman, which is about partial maladministration during the time. And at the most, it recommended £3,000. But instead of that even happening, it looks like, following a meeting between WASPI, Angela Madden, who seems to run it, that actually the government has started to put out the idea there will be a hardship fund. Now, if there is a hardship fund, people will have to prove that they've lost anything. And that will be very difficult, because a lot didn't get any letters. But also, she said she had to get a fair agreement with the government to cover looking after the taxpayer. I find this totally wrong. If people are justified to have compensation, it's perfectly reasonable for the taxpayer to pay out, because they've had about 6 years of hardship as a result of this. And to say, oh, well, we can't afford this now, and for WASPI to go along with it, it's pretty appalling, actually. And frankly, they're selling them out. And there is the other thing is that this doesn't represent the majority of pensioners who are affected by this, of the 50s women, because there is the CEDAW in law, which actually wanted to take up the issue of discrimination and have basically a resolution to the problem by negotiating with the government, have got a much wider claim. And also that all the pensioners in Wales have been left out, unless they happen to be a member of WASPI, and other groups as well are not represented. So this is really a faux negotiation that WASPI are doing, and they really have no right to claim that they represent all people, because they don't actually. I mean, they're really selling the pass on this, and I think people are going to be extremely disappointed when the government can be bothered to announce what it's going to do about this.
Right. Now, I wanted to move on to the winter fuel allowance, because that's obviously caused quite a lot of commotion, hasn't it? And it isn't going away.
No, it isn't at all. I mean, it's interesting, because I've been, as well as writing on my blog on this, I've just done a piece for the Pensioner magazine, which is produced by the Whitehall, one of the Whitehall pensioners. And I looked at it, and I looked at her speech. She suddenly announced this out of the blue, claiming, well, there's a £22 billion black hole we've discovered, which actually is contested by the Conservatives. Therefore, the first thing we've got to do is to take away pensioners' winter fuel allowances. And I actually thought this was really bad. But it gets worse, because if you are running a good government and you're planning a change to regulations, you should produce to Parliament an impact statement, which is basically telling you who are the people affected, how much, what is the ratio between those who are wealthy pensioners and those who are poor. And this was not provided in any shape or form. And in fact, it so annoyed peers in the House of Lords that they produced a special report on the regulation, pointing out that this was wrong, because good government, you should actually tell people how are going to be affected, what this means. And also they criticised them because there is a statutory body called the Social Security Advisory Committee, which by law must be consulted on any changes to benefits or pensions. And they proposed to bypass it by saying, well, we are going to send it to them, but after we've already made up the decision and it's final. And that was heavily criticised by peers in the House of Lords. I mean, so much so that there was an attempt in the Lords when the regulation came up. It didn't succeed by Baroness Altman, the former pensions minister, to annul the regulation, which actually the Lords regarded as a bit too strong, and it didn't get anywhere. But they did pass a motion of regret, saying that this was wrong to do this. So it's recorded forever, and it was the Conservative and opposition peers who actually pushed this, and the government lost the vote. In the Commons, I'm afraid, because Labour have such a huge majority, they got it through easily. They thought to be about 53 Labour MPs who abstained, but everyone else, every single party, from the Democratic Unionist Party and the Alliance in Northern Ireland to the Liberal Democrats to the independent MPs, including 5 of the former Labour MPs who had the whip taken away, voted against it. So basically everyone, it didn't matter whether it was the Green Party, the Reform Party, or everything, thought it was wrong. But the government, because it had a huge majority, just sailed it through. On top of that, I must say there have been 1 or 2 really interesting things that have come out. The Equality and Human Rights Commission, to their credit, warned the government they'd broken the law by not issuing an equality statement. So what the government did was they issued it after Parliament had gone into recess. And that actually shows really the effects of the people. And it's quite interesting because including the ethnic breakdown, and this is quite interesting. In this country at the moment, about 16% of people are from ethnic minorities and 84% are what you would probably call white British. But among the group affected, 95%, because they're older, are white British, and only 5% are actually from ethnic minorities, which probably explains why a lot of pensioners who feel they've worked their whole lives are quite annoyed about the way they're being treated in this case. And then, after all this, the Office for National Statistics finally produced an age breakdown of what had happened, which actually showed that growing numbers, is now over 3 million people, lose the £300 allowance, the higher annual payment, because a number of people in their 80s is growing. And so they are considerably the worst affected. The other extraordinary thing is it also provided a breakdown because of the Brexit agreement, believe it or not. Pensioners who were living and retired in the EU have a guarantee under the treaty we signed to continue having the winter fuel allowance, and the government can't do anything about this. An international treaty. And there are some extraordinary things. It gave a breakdown, and there were about 34,000 of these people. 26,000 were living in the Republic of Ireland. And there's now going to be a complete divide, because I looked up the figures of people who can claim it in Northern Ireland. It's 290,000. That probably includes some on pension credit who will still get it. They're going to get nothing, while if they've moved to the Republic of Ireland, they're going to continually get it because the government can't do anything about it. The other interesting fact is, and I didn't know this, is because I couldn't explain why suddenly my blog has had in the last month over 750 hits from Germany. And suddenly this showed up because they're well over, I think, 2,800 people, pensioners, who've retired to Germany, which might explain why they were interested in what was going on. And they're going to continue getting it as well. And one or two, and also it's mainly for the northern. People in Spain don't get it. People in Italy do get it, presumably because northern Italy, it gets colder than other areas. People in Bulgaria who've retired get it as well, actually.
Does it depend on how cold the circumstances are? Right.
Yeah, people in Spain don't get it, actually, for example, because it's gone Portugal, because it's regarded as a warm climate.
It makes sense, doesn't it, really, I suppose?
Yeah, it does, and that's probably perfectly fair. People in Switzerland will get it 2025, because Switzerland is aligned. Although it's not a member of the EU, it follows EU social security policy. So therefore, but the government did Boris Johnson did actually negotiate a thing. They will get it this year, but they won't get it next year. It will go after that. So it was quite a fascinating. But you see, all this stuff should have been available for a vote, and it is a disgraceful thing for a government to do. And I hope the present Labour government's not going to go around with other legislation, not providing proper impact statements, not consulting as it should. I mean, the only clue I could get why they rushed this through came up in the Office for National Statistics, because it disclosed that last year the qualifying date to get the winter fuel allowance meant you had to have a pension by the third week of September. And I think this is the hidden thing why they rushed it through, because that is the rules. And I'm wondering what's going to happen to the government's encouraging lots of people to claim pension credit. I mean, some of them will obviously have not got it by the third week in September. And I'm wondering whether they might get a shock as well and not qualify. But I presume the government is not so crass as to encourage people to apply and then say you can't have it for the following year, because that would be really wrong. So I feel really strongly about this.
Yes, it's been quite a thing, hasn't it? This.
People are going to die, I think, over this, because, I mean, the last research that was done, and this is really ironic, 2017, Theresa May thought about doing the very same thing, and the Labour Party totally opposed it, and produced figures showing that 4,000 people extra a year would die as a result of this. And I couldn't believe it at the Labour Party conference. I saw that Sarah Jones, when she was on Newsnight, actually told Newsnight that nobody would die. And there was an incredulous response to this, because, frankly, I think she's made a severe mistake. I did have a very wicked idea, which I might suggest to people. Politics is the sort of area where governments hope that people forget about things and we move on and so on. And I had a very wicked idea about this. If someone dies from hypothermia, I actually had a thought: what would the government do if, when they died and they buried them, they put up a gravestone, remembering their beloved thing, they added at the bottom, frozen to death, by Rachel Reeves or frozen to death by Sir Keir Starmer, because gravestones last a very long time, as most people have been saying.
They do.
So it will be known hundreds of years that they did this. And I just had a thought. I don't know what your listeners think about it, but I began to think, but frankly, there should be a comeback on this if people die, because it's they've had the money, and I've seen it from comments on my blog. I had a 91-year-old from Scotland who it was only heating one room, and he was actually writing to me telling you wouldn't be able to heat it this winter. Well, Scotland's a rather cold place. It's colder than
London,
the South East.
It is, yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know whether listeners would think I'm being too strong.
I wanted to ask you, David, about will the court challenge from Govan Law Centre force a government U-turn?
Well, this is quite interesting. For what I've said before about no impact statement and everything else, as I understand it, the Govan Law Centre are going on this, that the government hadn't actually fulfilled its proper consultations. And I think they might stand a strong chance. And the fact that it will be heard in Scotland and not in London might make a big difference, because I don't know what the Scottish lawyers are like, but I imagine they would look at it, because they're taking both the Scottish government, which had to follow what the English government do, or provide extra money in Scotland to cover this, which would be too big a problem for them. And I think this will be really. I think this will be a really interesting case, and then I would imagine if they win the judicial appeal, unfortunately, like the 50s women, the government would then want to appeal it and try and delay as long as possible. But I think it's really bad, actually. I think they have a good chance. Let's say that. Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, we obviously send all our best wishes out to all the 1950s women as we try and support them in everything, and publicise what's going on. So I think that and I thank you for the work that you do for them, David, as well.
Oh, well, I guess I have for years thought that this group, which is a large group, it's still over 3 million, have been really cheated, and that no one seemed to be standing up for them properly, and not even, as I say, WASPy. They actually don't seem to think that they deserve to be properly compensated. So I really do feel for them, because a lot of them are struggling, and to actually also have to put up with the rest of the people who are now claiming their pensions, that they're losing the winter fuel allowance as well, unless they're extremely poor and on pension credit. And also, I might add, they're probably going to be taxed soon. And certainly if the allowances on pensions, if the tax thing is frozen to 2028, as Labour haven't said they're going to change this, by 2028, probably most pensioners will be paying tax on their pensions, which is another appalling thing as well.
Yeah. David, thank you very much. It's been lovely to talk to you again today, and let's hope we talk again very soon, perhaps with Joe and everybody else. We'll have a special soon, and we'll have everybody on and talk about the issues again affecting 50s women.
That would be great to do that, and it's really, really nice talking. And thanks for having me on the programme as well.
That's great, David. Thank you very much.